Singer David is absolutely done. As we look today at his criminal case, of course, the legal mindset, we teach you to be your own judge. I'm Andrew Esquire, American attorney, and we're going to get into this case today. So let's start here. Of course, we have the defendant in this case, David Anthony Burke. He's a famous singer for those that don't know, and obviously he is now on trial. You see him here in the actual court when these proceedings were going down just the other day. So looking at this case, this is a very, very heinous situation with some very serious facts. So turning to my opening statement, 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, her remains were found in September of 2025 in the trunk of David's abandoned Tesla. He was arrested in April 16, 2026 and charged with murder, continuous abuse of a child under 14, and mutilation of the body. He has pled not guilty and he has been held without bail. Now, this is a very, very crazy and difficult scenario because there's a lot of facts here. There's a lot of evidentiary issues, and there's also a mountain of evidence.
Yo, I media trained you. That's controversial.
It's controversial of kids.
And that's the first thing I want to address when we're looking at this case. So the first thing we get to is the cause of death. And this is Celeste dying by being stabbed by an object that caused 2 penetrating wounds to her torso and caused a liver injury. Toxicology found she was presumptively positive for benzos and meth, MDMA, that's ecstasy as well. I have personally spoken to witnesses who told me David used hard drugs with them. Well, this is definitely believable. Obviously, if you're going to the murder level, then obviously if you're willing to murder somebody, then obviously using drugs would not be a far stretch from there. Definitely can see that. One of the other interesting things is the references that David makes in many of his music videos and his statements about death and about people passing away, and also even in one of his music videos where you have a image of a girl who looks very, very much like Celeste being stabbed. Kind of all these references, all this evidence is definitely going to be brought up, and once again it seems like he essentially was telling on himself throughout the presentation and his public appearances around the death of Celeste. Another thing to get to now is getting to what went down on the actual night. And this is a very interesting scenario because it paints a picture of not, David doing this alone or David being in a situation where no one saw him, but it paints a more complicated picture. So it says here, on April 24th, 2025, just hours after prosecutors alleged that David Anthony Burke, killed Celeste Rivas Hernandez, his management held a Withered album release in Los Angeles beginning at 8 p.m. David then took a red-eye flight to New York afterwards. All of his managers were likely in LA for the party. The house that Celeste was lured to, according to prosecutors, was leased by his management company. So you're going to have some investigation there, of course. So the question is, who knew what and when did they know it? April 23rd and 24 were not quiet, uneventful day or nights. David had just performed at Coachella. His album was being released and a party was being held in his honor. There were people around him and he was the center of attention. It is difficult to believe he had much time completely alone. Who knew what and when? And that's a very, very good question. And that's something that the defense attorney that was hired by David, very, very expensive attorney, Blair Burke, who is very famous for handling high-profile celebrity cases, she's going to try to interject maybe doubt, try to interject, a timeline here, alibis, but all of that in the world is not going to get over mountains and mountains of potential evidence, especially as to the inappropriate images and the possession of those, which once again is massive. So looking here, they say a couple of other items of interest from the David hearing this morning. The assistant district attorney confirmed there were 3 separate investigative grand juries convened in November 2025, December 2025, and February 2026. She also stated that the defense would need to provide a 10 terabyte drive for David's iCloud account alone. Additional search warrants were served on phones, tablets, and other devices at the time of David's arrest.
And
hold on. Go back.
And a copy of the complaint, and we would ask the people respectfully to produce discovery at the earliest opportunity.
Your Honor, as I indicated to counsel, there's approximately 40 terabytes of discovery in this case.
40 terabytes?
Now, while XQC may be shocked that there are 40 terabytes of evidence that is going to be presented in this case and gone over in this case. If this is a case, once again, involving multiple devices, you got iCloud uploads, it's a relationship that was going on for a while, you've got potential music videos, you've got other things going to be entered in there. I'm not shocked about 40 terabytes of evidence. What I am shocked about is at this point in the trial, we haven't seen a waiving of speedy trial. So the defense has not waived their right to speedy trial, and the prosecution has said, hey, we're ready to go forward in 60 days. So neither side is really like letting up on speeding trial or fighting back on speedy trial, which is absolutely insane to go over 40 terabytes of evidence and try to have all that reviewed within 60 days. I imagine that as we get closer to that 60-day deadline for speedy trial, once again, everyone has that right to a speedy trial. You have to actually waive that right. Once we get closer to that deadline, I'm thinking we're going to see the defense go and waive that right and extend that. I really cannot see this thing going forward in 60 days, although I'm not surprised about the mountain of evidence. The next thing I want to bring up is my judgment. So let's move over to the judgment. So in this mountain of evidence against David, the 40 terabytes of inappropriate content, I think is what's going to absolutely damn him. Even though he hired a top tier lawyer.
We believe the actual evidence will show David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, nor was he the cause of her death. And we would like to be able to have the evidence come into the light of day at the earliest opportunity.
The defense is going to be difficult due to the volume of evidence and publicity. He can't just bury this and make it go away, no pun intended. This is something that is already out there. It's beyond the point of no return. And he can be convicted on those images, on what he may have on those hard drives, the iCloud accounts. If he's got inappropriate images, then that is very much going to be able to put him away, perhaps even for longer than the homicide charges. So regardless of whether they can hit him on the homicide charges, which we'll get to as the trial progresses, we'll see how much the prosecution can prove this decisively, how much they can pin up the timeline, where he was, etc. We're going to get into that, and we're going to see that as this trial progresses. But what I stop on here is the images. That is just a hard stop. If he was possessing those images, or on his drives, or on his iCloud, he's done. He's cooked. He's absolutely finished. And that's a slam dunk that they really don't have to debate about or do anything else about. So we could see this case, and I can foresee this case because it is such a slam dunk there being some sort of perhaps really, really high plea deal or really insane plea deal that comes out that he probably will, reject one way or another. We'll see how that shakes out, but it could keep him in there for life, for absolute life, for the amount of potential images he's got there, regardless of the homicide. I think the homicide we may have with a good defense attorney, the ability to fight that, but with the images, that's just not going to happen. But I want to know what you guys think about the David case and how you think it's going to shake out, and I'll catch you on the next one.